Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent uh-oh experiences in business.
Learn what their uh-oh cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again.
Hey, cohesive leaders. Here we have on our podcast, Garrett Wood. Garrett, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Dr. Troy. Excited.
Good. Excellent. So, and you're doing well, I take it?
Very well today. Yeah, I'm on my decaf coffee, so I'm doing good now.
Okay, good. Well, I'm super duper. So
good.
How have you been?
I did a upper body workout today after a long run of the weekend, so I'm feeling energized. So feeling good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Now, is there regular caffeination in the morning, and now
There
you're
is.
just the rest of the
Yeah.
day? Okay.
Yeah,
You actually like the taste of it, not just what it does for you.
exactly. Yeah, it's
Good.
the side effect. Yeah.
Sweet. So, Garrett, one of the things we love doing in the beginning of the podcast is to ask you this question. Tell us something about you that is not on your professional resume or something you would find on a professional LinkedIn page.
Yeah, I think most people would be surprised to know that my sport of choice is parkour.
Parkour! So
Parkour!
You jump from building to building and space to space?
Some people do. I'm not one of those people, but yes, space to space, not building to building for me. Yeah.
And so, like, are you able to like this? Like, are you like Spider-Man? So you scale a building?
I would love to be Spider-Man, but there's a range of athletes. Not everybody's a professional NFL player. Just when they're, playing out their touch football, I would say I'm not a professional, but I have fun. Yeah.
Now, from my perspective, now I know folks that go out, and that's for the next hour or two. They're going out and parkouring. Do you also interact? Do you bring it into your life when you're just walking somewhere, like, oh, I'm going to do this and do a heel kick or whatever? Like, how do you integrate that into your life?
Yeah, if you're standing in line, you're getting bored and there's something there, yes, you're going to entertain yourself and look around, and you always kind of see the environment a little bit different through that parkour eye. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. And how long have you been doing this?
I got started just before 2020, so 2019. So what is that? 6-7 years now, almost. Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's been the
wild.
most rewarding part of it?
There's so many things that you think you can't do. I remember the first day I showed up and we got instruction, right? And they walked in and they're like, okay, we're going to jump from here to here. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're just going to do that. That's just how we start. That's the instruction, is just do the thing. Okay, great. And I fell, got back up, did it again. But I think a lot of times we're afraid of falling. Sometimes people talk about the most embarrassing thing is like falling, and they're like, oh, people saw me fall. Oh my gosh. And falling is kind of a normal, natural thing in a sport where you're jumping from one thing to the next. And I think getting good at it has actually proven to be very helpful for me. I could probably fall downstairs pretty well and not get too hurt this time around,
I think, and again, I don't know because I've never done, parkour.
Yeah.
When I first heard about it, I was going to say I'm more of a part 2 or a part 3. But I don't, but we don't have that music.
No.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
But I think that it would improve some of your strategic sort of thinking or your approach to situations, because I believe to parkour, you have to think about the environment, and then you're using aspects of the environment to further the parkour experience. And you may have to think quick on your feet if you're going to try to go from one spot to the next and see how that actually
outweigh consequences.
Yeah, and you're doing it in a split second. Like, it just also reminds us how quickly our mind can work for us. To try to describe it can take multiple seconds, but the brain is doing it instantaneously.
Yeah, and that's my favorite, is when you watch like a medium bail on parkour or fail, whatever you want to call those videos, you're watching someone's body, like a cat, almost naturally react to the environment they're in. There's no thought process. There's no coordination going on. It's just reaction. But they're so skilled at it and have such spatial awareness that it makes it look, more graceful than you would expect someone falling to look. But there is that challenge when you're up high and you're looking at a distance, you know that you have the strength and the speed and the skill to jump, whatever, 3 feet, 5 feet, whatever, 20 feet, whatever your thing is. But because you're 10, 20, 30 feet off the ground, you start weighing the consequences. Okay, how certain of that am I?
Yeah.
And you start thinking, your mind goes to the imagination of all the possible things that could go wrong, that aren't very probable or likely. So to be able to calm that part of your brain down, focus, and still be able to not let that part of your brain get in the way of your ability for your skill and your strength is its own separate kind of skill that shows up in the sport.
Which is kind of interesting from a leadership perspective, because the more you practice leadership, the better you'll be at it. It's like anything, right? The more you put your effort into it, the more you do it, the more you experience it, sometimes even in the failing, which is why I love this podcast so much. And it really started out almost as a little bit of a joke with Ben and I when we were first thinking about this podcast, and being like, yeah, boy, look at all the mistakes I've made. And, I still managed to survive. And we wanted to do a podcast that didn't have lots of bells and whistles, meaning that you're making it perfect and making it pretty, because leadership isn't perfect and pretty. Life is messy sometimes. So I think that, so it's really, really just a great opportunity to kind of do that.
And I love, though, that hearing that you actually went to a professional or had a coach in the parkour world. And it wasn't just, you saw some videos, let me go try this, and you're basing everything on your own. You literally learned from somebody to do this. And it's made humorous by the scenes from The Office and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I've enjoyed it, not in any type of official, but fairly athletic. I do mud runs and obstacle courses, but
Yeah.
that's probably my next thing I'm going to jump in. I'm excited about that.
And
In a
that's
transition,
actually how I got started, was signing up for like a Spartan race. And I was
Oh,
like,
yeah?
I'm going to go try to train, find a gym inside to do that. That'll be fun. And the gym we found happened to be a parkour gym, and never ended up doing the Spartan race, but here we are.
Heck
So,
yeah.
Love it.
That's
Love
awesome.
it.
All right, so we got to know a really cool hobby interest of yours. Next thing is, are your character traits or behaviors that folks would describe Garrett as? What would you describe yourself as, or what would others describe when you're not in the room? Or what would you hope that they would describe you as a person? This is character behavior traits, not roles or hats that you wear, but who you are as a person.
yeah, I would hope that they would think that I think about things well enough to help support them. I hope that they would think that I'm compassionate or kind or understanding. Yeah. But I think I'm just a big nerd who enjoys talking to people and learning everything I can about them.
Sometimes that might not go together, saying, being a big nerd and then wanting to talk to somebody. How do you align those two thoughts from a traditional sense?
I think that, if something's out there that's worth valuable for people, someone's thought about it for a long time, getting assessed about it, and then spent the hours and dedication that it takes to write it down and rewrite it down and rewrite it down over and over and over, work up the nerve to show it to somebody, have them critique the crap out of it multiple times, and then hit publish and send it out to the world. So I have a big affection for books, because I feel like there's something there that someone thought was worth all of that effort. And even if it's just 2 sentences from it, it's probably worth learning about, and someone will need to know that message. But not everybody enjoys reading. Is something that I really enjoy. So it almost makes it a superpower for me to be able to kind of sift through a large, dense text and pull out stuff that's important for other people in the moment they need it. Saving those hours of 700 pages, just they don't have time for that.
I love the fact that you spoke about wanting to connect with people, like how important that is. And when we started out this podcast, like we do all the podcasts, we always ask that question, like, tell us something about you, professional, it's not on your professional resume and so forth. What is your go-to question for building relationships?
Yeah, it depends on the person and the situation we're meeting in, right? If it's a really professional environment, we're going to talk about some of their struggles and frustrations that they're feeling. If we're meeting in a more casual environment, it's, what gets you excited? What got you out of bed with a smile on your face last week, if at all, hopefully,
Yeah.
So.
Because our question is designed to create connections before content. So like before we dive into the whole meat of what we're doing, it's how do we relate to you as a person or as an individual, which really feeds the question about the characteristics. And I was happy to hear you actually really go in, because I have my little uh-oh button here. That that I push whenever you start saying a name like, oh, well, people will think I'm a good father, or I'm a good businessman, or I'm a good something, then those are uh-ohs, because see, now we're ready for that. Now we know that you're kind and compassionate, you like to build relationships. What are the roles that you have played? What are those R's in the roles that you played?
Yeah, currently now, I work as a coach, and I help support leaders that are going through it, usually with burnout. That's primarily what they show up, not on my doorstep, but in my Zoom meeting to work with them on. Yeah.
Now, when you're referring to leaders, are you talking to business owners, certain size companies, executives, managers? What are you? How are you labeling or classifying the leaders that end up on your virtual doorstep?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to work with all types. So that has been C-suite, which has been different sizes, right? So startup world founders moving into that, but then also larger, not Fortune 500, but maybe Fortune 1000 size companies, which are huge organizations. But there's so many tiers of leadership in those large ones. But it is more challenging when you're a small business owner because it's you and every other role. So those tend to be people that show up with more burnout more often than not, just because the hats that they have to wear can make their head spin almost so many times they have to put them on and take them off, right?
And what careers interest or did you have prior to being in this role where you can be a coach or a consultant to leaders with burnout? Like what were your roles before that?
Yeah, every time I've ever gotten into anything, I've always been a client, well, long before I've ever had the opportunity to become a practitioner. So I was burned out and overwhelmed at my corporate position where I had a team of 100 people over 7 locations. So it was a lot of work. It was hospitality, so it was open 7 days a week, 20 of the 24 hours a day. And we were service-based, so quite a bit of interpersonal communication between the providers, their clients. So it was a lot of action going on, lots of personalities, lots of procedures. And it was a production-based company, so we cared a lot about revenue on like an hourly sometimes basis. So it was really dynamic, super exciting. And because it was that dynamic of an environment, you could do something as a leader. You could make an intervention or change something, and then you could see the feedback almost immediately ripple out at the end of that week, which is great as a new leader trying to see how to, what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you sharing some of that background and letting folks get to know you in a little different way. I know you've prepared for our conversation today, so I think it's time we just get to the meat of it and ask you, what is the experience that you as a leader wanted to share, something that's very personal to you that occurred, and just go ahead and give us some of the background and the details, and then we'll just follow up with some additional questions. But what is your experience that you plan to share with us today?
Yeah, there's so many to choose from, right? Like leadership is just a series of like failure after failure, hopefully sticking around long enough that they're like not catastrophic ones, so that way you can keep making them. But the biggest one for me was I was sitting at the beach at the end of a long month, at the end of a long quarter, and I was sitting there trying to clear my head. I had my dog with me, and this guy walked by and was like, "Oh, look at the beautiful day," and I just was in the funks, and I really was frustrated because I looked at that spreadsheet I was talking about, and I'm at the bottom of it. My emotions were kind of like, if I was doing well, then I was doing well. If I was doing bad on the spreadsheet, I was emotionally doing bad. And I was like, this is not working for me. I got to figure this out. But the real challenge came, it wasn't too long after that. It was like probably 4 or 5 weeks after that. One of the exemplars in the company, someone who had been there for 20 of their 25 years, who was always at the top of that chart. And every time you ask him, hey, how's it going? What are you up to? Everything just seemed good. He was fine, just the cool as a cucumber all the time. But he'd gotten let go. And within 2 weeks, I was sitting in a meeting with his replacement. And that was just kind of the head spinning there, right? Like, wow, 20 years and 2 weeks later, here we are. Wow. And then we got word in that meeting when I was sitting with his replacement that he had given so much of himself for so long, and that without that identity, without that title, there wasn't much else for him in his personal life that he felt like it was worth living for. And so that was a really these are very high stakes that we're playing with here. And I seemed like I was on that path. And it didn't matter how much I cared and was passionate about the work. That actually almost made it seem like it was more dangerous, like it was for him. So it was a big wake up call to be able to get out there and be like, burnout is not just, overwork and too many back-to-back meetings. There's something else going on here that we need to talk about.
It's a tough experience.
Yeah.
What did that experience though cost you? You experienced it, and then you made some changes. So what was the cost? What was the financial cost, the physical cost, the emotional cost of you getting to that point?
Prior to that burnout for myself, I guess you could put in my relationship counseling costs in there, right? Because interpersonal relationships were struggling. So I'm trying to take care of those. Let's go get a therapist and hang out, learn some more about how to communicate better. But also the chiropractic care and my doctor physical therapy for back pain and hip pain. Probably some sleep. So, you'd have to talk to like my rheumatoid arthritis or my rheumatoid to figure out how much my sleep deficit cost me in the long run of my health and wellness. But also my mental emotional state for such a long time. Living and dying by that spreadsheet was probably the most unhealthy thing you could do. Yeah.
And how did you get to the spreadsheet? I think that'll be helpful for listeners to understand. Like, it's good that you identified, oh, okay, this spreadsheet now is the trigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how you recognize the trigger was based on an experience of someone else, and then you applied that experience to you, which is a great way to learn. So how did you get to the spreadsheet?
So the spreadsheet actually ended up focusing on it less seemed to be the biggest change on the spreadsheet. So when I went and got help and asked for help, I was actually looking for help getting better sleep. That seemed to be the most important part. And so doing some research about sleep, there's non-sleep deep rest, which is kind of a theta state. And it seems like hypnosis is a state where people can get access to that. So I was like, okay, wherever the evidence leads us, let's go. Some very unorthodox places. Let's see what happens. So I met with a hypnotherapist for 12 sessions. And at the end of those 12 sessions, my sleep was better, but so was my back pain and my hip pain. But by the end of that quarter, 90 days later, the spreadsheet was completely different. And I hadn't thought about it for the last 90 days.
So, but how did you, I guess my question, I'm sorry, I didn't word it better, because what you just said was really good, because you said, this is how I get out of the situation, which was great, because we were going to ask that question and we'll delve a little bit more into it. But I wanted to know is, what made you create a spreadsheet to begin with?
Is it literal or figurative? Like, or are you saying you're tracking everything that's there, or is it a mental tool that you've used?
Oh no, it's a literal one, and it's not just me. It was for the entire company. So yeah, it's a nation. It was.
You were tracking everything.
Document.
Everybody was represented in this spreadsheet.
And this was because of all the people that you had reporting to your structure. You used this spreadsheet to help keep track of where things were and where people were.
Yep, absolutely. Where they are, where their production is, what we've budgeted versus what their production month to date and hour to date sometimes is. Yeah.
So how would you categorize, and I don't want this to be too leading, and I'll apologize up front if it sounds like it is, but I want to distinguish the difference between transactional and transformational. So in this discussion we've had, what would you identify to be more transactional, and then what would you identify to be transformational?
Yeah. So if you're, looking at those numbers and you're making assumptions about people, based upon those transactions, right? Between clients to service providers to that spreadsheet that we're tracking. You're only capturing the financial data. You're not necessarily capturing the emotional experience that all of those people were feeling all the way through. And the more stressed out I was about those numbers, the less availability I had to be able to tune myself to them, their needs, and then help support them and being able to do that for themselves so they could attune to their clients' needs as well. And so that transformational piece is that human piece. Yes, the numbers are good, the data is good, but if we don't understand the emotions behind them, we're only looking at probably less than 1/3 of the real problem, actually.
Yeah. So what I want to kind of say to those folks who are listening, spreadsheets aren't bad. We just need to understand how to use the spreadsheet, and the fact that relationships are built not only from transactions, but from transformation, from how you actually will interact with individuals. So what I think I'm hearing you say, so I'm just kind of recapping, but tell me if I'm wrong, is there's a balance between how you can pursue a transactional sort of responsibility that you have inside of an organization for people and tasks and things that need to be done, and then how you actually will establish more of a, I care about you, I care about your success, I want to know what you're going through, I need to understand that to better help and support you.
Absolutely.
I see that there's a potential for transformation in the elements of, we teach the retention debriefs at the end of the day where you check in with somebody. And so if you wanted to make this as something that was recorded, at the end of the day, you get a text back saying, hey, my day was a 7 out of a 10 or something like that. So you're able to track emotions on that and be able to check in. So then as the transformational leader, you can go back and check in because you've tracked their emotional states. So that's a way that you can do that data wise. So
so anytime you can take qualitative data such as the feelings, emotions, concepts, understandings, and you can quantify it, then you do have a way to potentially evaluate it more succinctly than simply going on a gut and a feeling. Now, I'm not telling you my gut's not good. You know, and I've worked at it for a long time, so I know it's pretty good. But I would say that, you know, doing something like that, and what Ben is talking about, just for you and for others who are listening, is a retention debrief. Is when you set up an opportunity for the individuals that you are working with, for them to tell you how they feel at the end of the day. And it's a rating system. It's the easiest thing possible. And if you have a shared directory, they can just go in and plug in the number, but you want it to be more private for you. So you really want to try to keep it to yourself. And it can be a text message, it can be an email, it can be whatever. I know you have 100 people, so it may be very challenging. So you could set up an every other day or put them on some of a routine so you're checking in frequently, not necessarily every day. But if you can get that number, it helps you determine, because what research will tell us is that how a person feels at the end of the day is generally how they'll start the next day.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I mean, ultimately, you already started going into how you went to fix, you know, by going, you know, the hypnosis. So kind of go into that a little bit more. That's a different technique from when we hear of other people. Well, they aligned with this, they did this, and, you know, things were right the next day. Like, tell us that journey.
Yeah. And a lot of times when people are sharing their emotions, the emotions aren't just necessarily like what happened at work. It's why they have their own filters of why that happened, right? And when stakes are high and they're that high for a long time, you know, we have a tendency to, or at least I do, begin to collect evidence for our worst version of ourselves. You know, if you're not well fed, well rested, the way you filter out the world, little things are big things are catastrophic things. And it's harder to access those positive emotions and easier to access all of those negative feelings. And when you're doing that for a long period of time, it's really easy to see all of those failures as proof and evidence, not that you're learning and growing and changing, but that you suck, or you're no good, very bad, terrible person, or a boss. And that makes it even harder to be present for yourself, to be with other people, to be able to even be in a place to help support those emotions. And so with the hypnotherapy, it seemed like at the end of it, what I actually learned from that process is that I happen to be the bottleneck. My own subconscious beliefs and fears and frustrations got in the way of me being able to be in like a decently regulated nervous system enough to be able to be a supportive leader to other people.
And so when you talk about this, and this part is like very interesting to me, the hypnosis part, right? So you basically were hypnotized to sort of be able to, and so you have to get this, right? When people think, like for me, when I think of hypnotism, it's like all of a sudden they're going to make me walk like a chicken on a stage, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so I don't want that. How do you get yourself into that comfort that you'll let yourself go? Because I believe that part of the hypnosis is your willingness to be hypnotized, that if you restrain from it, then you can keep yourself from that happening. But how do you convince yourself, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I am truly going to trust this person. I'm going to let myself go so that I can, you know, get out of it, whatever I'm trying to get out.
Yeah, and I love the bringing up of the stage shows, right? That's most people's exposure to hypnosis. And the trick of those shows, right? So if you ever go to one of these shows and you want to know the behind the scenes, people walk in and out of a state of hypnosis all the time. That's a normal, natural part of our day. Waking up, going to sleep. If you've ever laughed or cried at a movie, you know, highway hypnosis is like kind of a thing. You show up at home and you're like, wow, I'm glad I got here safe because I don't remember being here. These are all various states of hypnosis. So in those shows, when there's 100 people in a room, probably 20% of them are already in a state of hypnosis. And then when you're asking for volunteers, you're asking for people that have very little inhibitions, that are excited to go up and be made fun of and share that joy with other people at their own expense. You know, not everybody's willing to do that, but in a room of 100, you'll get a few. And so what they're really selecting for is who are those people, and out of those people, how many of them are already in a state of hypnosis. And so from there is no battle of should I or should I not do this. There's just like, yes, 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 absolutely, let's go. And that's what makes for a great show. When you're looking for a therapeutic practice, regardless of what type of therapeutic intervention, even in coaching, it's that bond between you and the person you're working with. It's that supportive relationship. If that relationship doesn't exist, it's not going to be a therapeutic experience for you in the first place.
Yeah. So I'd like to explore maybe what are some other things that you did to not do that one again, especially if there are individuals who are listening who aren't quite as comfortable, even though they might understand that I could be in hypnosis all the time, because I have been,
Sure.
I mean, I've driven past an exit that I was supposed to get off because
Right.
I was already so focused on something else. So I kind of understand what you were saying, but
Yeah.
what other things did you do, or would you recommend that folks do to not do the spreadsheet burnout program
and avoid it?
Yeah, and avoid it.
Yeah, burnout's a pretty serious thing, right? And it is a workplace phenomenon, and it does matter about the organizational structure, but also making sure that your personality traits and the things that your own unique nervous system needs are well supported and accommodated, and trying to figure out how to close that gap. So whether that's your own sensory thresholds, you know, what type of environment do you like working in, or what can you not work in? Sometimes you put people in a library and they're like, finally, and other people, they're like, oh, I'm gonna go crazy in here, I cannot do that. But even something as simple as that makes it harder to show up and do the tasks of your job. It's like always pulling your attention away. And at the end of the day, that can overwhelm people's ability to do the other things that help support them, which is, you know, get your good sleep, get your workout in, whether that's whatever it may be, get some endorphins going. But that idea that if you don't feel like there's time in your day to eat, to sleep, to care for yourself, that's a belief that something is going on there that needs to be addressed in the long run. And for me, at least, it was. Absolutely the biggest change.
And you made the connection to what triggered for you was another person's experience. I would think, though, that things were happening for you along the way that was giving you pause or caution before that trigger, you know, actually happened. Are you able to share with us what some of that may have looked like? Like, were you realizing that you weren't getting enough sleep? Were you more agitated than normal? Were you more closed off? I mean, what were some of the things that were happening for you?
Yeah, exactly. All of those things, almost in exactly that order. Yeah, for sure. This idea of like, oh, if I get up earlier, I can get that report done. I can get out to this meeting earlier. That's important. Okay, I can miss a couple hours of sleep. It's fine. And that's true. But if that becomes your day-to-day requirement just to get through the week, you're going to hit a point of diminishing returns pretty quickly. The easiest, silliest way to think about it, though, is my dog's this cute little dog, and I love her dearly. And she's always a cute, lovable dog. But there's some days where I don't find her cute and lovable in that moment. She's annoying or irritating or whatever that may be. And that's a great sign that whatever is going on is too much for me to handle, because she hasn't changed her behavior. The only thing that's different is me. And I think it's nice because it's kind of an innocent being there versus, you know, your relationship with your supervisor or someone on your team. There are a lot of moving dynamics. And so sometimes you can be like, yeah, they really were being a jerk today. And maybe they were being a jerk today because they had their own issues going on, but maybe it's you. So how do we decide that is kind of challenging sometimes, you know, chicken or an egg. But with my dog, it's always easy to tell if it's been a little too many days of too much for too long.
Yeah. And I would see it as that when you recognize those discomforts or awkwardness, it doesn't mean the change has to happen. It just means maybe a conversation needs to happen with yourself, with somebody else. I was advised early in my younger years on the keyhole principle of roommates. And basically I was told, and this helped me so much, when you start to cringe when the roommate starts to put his key in the keyhole, it's time for a new roommate. Or now I would say it's time for a conversation. Like, you've been pushing something off for too long. Like, all these little things have been a problem. Back then, you just would have found a new roommate and moved away. But like now, it's wiser to handle something. But I would say that that's in our life too. Like, when we start feeling that discomfort, have a serious one-on-one with yourself or whoever. So you have you have clients that you do this with. Is there a typical first step that when someone realizes they're approaching burnout or they've already burnt out, what is the first step you take them on?
Yeah, and if they're in burnout, the first step is very different than if they're approaching it, because the capacity you have to address it is completely different, right? If we're at that first initial stages, you know, 1, 2, or even 3 sometimes, it's easy to like step back and think about things rationally, reasonably, and be like, okay, let's decide how to make decisions about this. But if we're already in a state of burnout, that capacity is so greatly diminished, and it's so much more important to use whatever capacity you have to keep the train on the tracks, that we're working on something that's going to create more ease and comfort for them. So sometimes that's like somatic regulation stuff. Sometimes it's breath work kind of stuff, right? But sometimes it's just having them be able to have a safe place to share their frustrations, work out their first 2 or 3 passes of what they'd want to say to that roommate as they walk through the door in your example, and get that off their chest, and then be like, okay, what do I actually need to say that's important? And so it depends on what they're presenting. Is it the interpersonal relationships that are showing up with their burnout that's really driving it, or is there something else going on? And so we'll play with that. And so that first step is kind of assessing what they are, where they're at, and what their nervous system needs.
So given that information, and that the main audience for our listeners are emerging leaders early in their career,
Yeah.
that are often in the drive mindset, right? They're going to burn the midnight oil. They've got maybe even a side hustle. They're trying to go at it.
Yeah.
What is the advice to implement so they don't get down those paths? And unfortunately, they're not bringing you business.
Yeah, I would love for people to not have to show up. There's way too many people out there, not enough support for them, right? There's this idea, and a big myth here in the States is like, the more you sacrifice, the more likely you are to be successful. And the hard part is there are people that are more than willing to put in the hard work. They're able to tune out those little aches and pains day to day, and they're able to zero in and focus and get a lot of early success. But the volume that they'd have to sustain to be successful in today's culture, and they can't do it. That's just because we're an organic machine,
Right.
We have repairs that we need to have. And so that belief, I think, might be helpful on mile 24 of a 26 long race. But if we're talking 26-year long race, that's not going to be a helpful mindset. So if that's something that they've always traded on, there's competitive advantage, we might need to develop something else. And it might be this idea that real lasting success is built through your well-being, not at its expense. And so figuring where the gaps are in your well-being.
That's a good section or clip right there, right? To be able to talk about.
Yeah.
And so Garrett, how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, if people want to be really professional, they can follow me on the social professional platform, LinkedIn, at Gnosis Therapy. Or if they're more personal, Instagram, Gnosis Therapy, or they can reach out to my website, which is also the same thing, Gnosis Therapy.
Spell that for folks that are listening.
Yeah, it's GNOSIS Therapy. Yeah.
Right. And it's Garrett, Garrett Wood, WOOD for LinkedIn.
You got it. Yep.
Okay. All right, Garrett, we know that you have worked really hard on preparing for this interview today, which is really awesome. You brought a lot of really great stuff to the table. What was a question that you thought we would ask that we didn't?
Yeah, I was expecting you to dive a little bit deeper into the hypnosis part of it. I thought that would be interesting. That kind of off topic. I guess it's probably not as strange as the parkour either, right? Those are kind of two off topic, unexpected things.
Yeah. So, well, Ben, we did explore a little bit.
Yeah, but tell us more about the process you went down. Let's dive into it, because that's, I want to make sure that we go into that to understand professionally how it was done and how many sessions over what was the experience like?
Yeah, it was relaxing and enjoyable. Yeah, every time I went in, I walked out feeling like, oh, I feel like I took a nap. I feel better. Actually, I feel more relaxed, and I feel like the world's a little bit sunnier.
You actually don't know what happened?
So did somebody put a little thing in front of you and say, watch this back and forth, move your eyes left to right?
There might be some people that practice that way, but that's not common. No, and that wasn't my experience.
So what
it
is
was laying down in a reclined state and keeping my eyes open and taking some long, slow, deep breaths, closing my eyes, and then eventually drifting into what really feels like vivid imagery. When someone reads the book and then they're like, hey, the movie's not great, the book's so much better. It's almost because their imagination is better than all the production set designers in Hollywood could ever come up with. And it's the same thing when you go into this state. You're using the power of your imagination. They prompt you to bring up these experiences, and then you fill in the blanks. And if there are stressful experiences, but you're in that deep, relaxed state, those stressful experiences become less stressful. It's almost like your body learns that experientially, that these things you're concerned about aren't as stress inducing as you need them to be. There might be another way to approach it.
Series of questions. how long were sessions, how many sessions, how long of time did this take, and did you go into it saying, this is what I want to address, or was everything built on a plan that was created at the initial outset with your therapist?
Yeah, exactly that. Hey, these are the presenting issues. These are my presenting concerns. Here's what I'd like to see different, right? Okay, great. We'll set up that. And then every time we go, what's better, worse, or same? What's changed for you? What do we need to focus on more this time? What's still, bringing up or showing up some struggles? So that was over 12 sessions. So it was once a week for those 90 days. Yeah. And it was about an hour each time. Yeah.
Okay,
great. Awesome.
Yep.
Garrett, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you on the Cohesive Leaders podcast. We're going to close out today, like we do with all of our Cohesion Culture programs, with this simple mantra. You don't have to know everything.
You just need to be teachable.